Hello, I never thought I'd be here, but here I am. I've read countless stories on this subreddit about cheating spouses, gaslighting, and people ignoring red flags, and every time I thought, that could never be me. I wasn't naive. I wasn't the type to be easily fooled. But I guess nobody ever thinks they're the one wearing the blindfold until it's ripped off. That I should have seen the signs. Looking back, it all seems so obvious, but at the time, I chalked it up to stress, work, or just the natural ups and downs of a relationship. My wife, Jessica, and I had been married for 6 years, and for the most part, I thought things were good. Sure, we had the occasional argument, but nothing serious, nothing that ever made me question our foundation. Then, slowly, things started shifting. It wasn't overnight, and that's what made it so insidious. Jessica became more distant, less affectionate. At first, I assumed she was just exhausted from work. She had a demanding job in marketing, and I knew it could be stressful. But then the excuses started piling up. She was too tired, too busy, too overwhelmed to spend time with me, yet somehow, she always had energy for nights out with her friends or last-minute work meetings. I started noticing other little things, too. Her phone, which used to sit on the counter or coffee table without a second thought, was now glued to her hand. If I walked into the room, she'd lower it slightly, just enough so I couldn't see the screen. Her texts became more frequent, her attention elsewhere, even when I was right in front of her. Then there were the late nights. Jessica had never been the kind of person to stay late at work, but suddenly, she was. 3, sometimes 4 times a week, she wouldn't get home until hours after she was supposed to. When I asked about it, she brushed me off, saying the company had taken on a huge project and she had no choice. That I wanted to believe her. I did believe her, and that was my mistake, because then came the biggest red flag of all. The cleaner. About a year ago, Jessica had insisted we hire a cleaning service. She claimed we were both too busy to keep up with deep cleaning, and honestly, I didn't argue. It seemed like a reasonable thing to do. The service sent over a guy named Daniel, late 20s, quiet, did his job well. I barely noticed him, and that's what made it all the more jarring when I realized Jessica was suddenly noticing him a lot. At first, it was little things. She made sure to be home whenever he came over, even when she had no real reason to be. She started talking to him more, laughing at his jokes, offering him drinks or snacks. I told myself she was just being polite, but something about it felt off. Then, I found out she was tipping him way more than necessary. I checked our bank statements one day and noticed that what was supposed to be a standard payment had been padded with hefty, extra appreciation. She shrugged it off when I brought it up, saying he worked hard and deserved it, but the moment that really made my stomach drop? The hoodie point. One evening, I was doing laundry when I pulled a hoodie out of the hamper, one that didn't belong to me. It smelled faintly of cologne, and it definitely wasn't anything I had ever worn. When I asked Jessica about it, she barely hesitated before saying it was Daniel's, that he must have left it behind while cleaning. Something didn't sit right. Why would he take off his hoodie while cleaning? Why hadn't she told me about it before? And more importantly, why did she sound so defensive, like she had already rehearsed her answer? I wanted to press further, but she made such a scene about how ridiculous I was being that I let it go. And that was the biggest mistake of all, because that hoodie, that was just the beginning. After the hoodie incident, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Jessica's reaction had been too defensive, too rehearsed, like she had an answer ready before I even asked the question. But I told myself I was being paranoid. I had no proof of anything, just a gut feeling that wouldn't go away. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I started paying attention, and almost immediately, I noticed things I had been blind to before. Jessica's attitude toward me had completely changed. If I asked her about her day, she'd barely respond, acting as if I was inconveniencing her. If I tried to make plans, she was always too busy. She wasn't just distant, she was outright cold. But the strangest part, she was suddenly in a great mood on cleaning days. Every Wednesday, like clockwork, Daniel would show up, and Jessica's whole demeanor would shift. She'd be smiling more, laughing at things that weren't even funny. And when he left, she'd hum to herself while doing things around the house like she had just had the best day, that I wasn't stupid. Something was going on. So I decided to test something. One Wednesday, I told her I was working late. I made a big deal about how I had to stay late at the office, how I wouldn't be home until after 10 p.m. She barely even reacted, just nodded and said, okay. That was red flag number one. Usually, when I worked late, she'd at least say something, ask what time I'd be home, if I wanted her to save dinner, anything. But this time? She didn't care. So, instead of going to the office, I parked down the street from our house and waited. At exactly 6 p.m., Daniel's car pulled up. That wasn't surprising, he always came around this time. What was surprising was that Jessica opened the door before he even knocked. Almost like she had been waiting for him. I watched as he walked inside. No cleaning supplies. No equipment. Nothing. That was red flag number two. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wanted to barge in right then and there, but I knew if I did, I wouldn't have any proof. I needed to be smart. So I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. By 8:30, the lights in our bedroom flicked on, and that was it. That was the moment I knew. I got out of my car and walked straight to the house, my heart pounding in my chest. Every step felt heavy, like I was marching towards something I didn't want to see, but I couldn't turn back now. I didn't even knock. I had my key. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Then, from down the hall, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of voices, coming from our bedroom. My entire body went cold. I took a deep breath, forced myself to move, and walked toward the door, and then without thinking I pushed it open, and there they were, Jessica. Daniel. Together. In our bed, and in that moment, everything inside me shattered. I don't remember what I expected to see when I opened that door, but what I saw is burned into my mind forever. Jessica, my wife, the woman I built a life with, was in our bed with Daniel. Our bed. For a split second, nobody moved. It was like time had frozen. Jessica's face turned ghost white the moment she saw me. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Daniel, on the other hand? He panicked. He scrambled out of bed, grabbing for his clothes like a kid caught doing something he wasn't supposed to, and me, I just stood there, completely numb. I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't even shocked. I was just blank. Like my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. Jessica was the first to react. And of course, she went straight into defense mode. She lunged for the blanket, pulling it around herself like somehow that would make this situation any better. Then, she had the audacity to act like I was the one invading her privacy. She started yelling, demanding to know why I was home early, why I was barging in like this. As if that even mattered. As if her being caught was somehow my fault that I didn't respond. I just stared at her, at Daniel, at the complete mockery of my marriage happening right in front of me, and that's when something in me snapped. The anger finally hit. All at once. I turned my attention to Daniel. The cleaner. The guy who used to come into my house to mop the floors and dust the shelves. Now he was in my bed. Daniel started mumbling something about how he didn't mean for this to happen, how it wasn't what it looked like. Which was laughable, because it was exactly what it looked like. I didn't care to hear a single word out of his mouth. I pointed at the door and told him to get out. To my surprise, he actually had the sense to listen. He grabbed his clothes off the floor, practically tripped over himself trying to get dressed, and bolted out of the room. The front door slammed shut behind him, leaving just me and Jessica. She looked at me, still clutching the blanket like it was a shield. And then, just like that, the lies started pouring out. She swore it was a mistake. That it wasn't what it looked like. That she never meant for this to happen. That I didn't say anything. I just laughed, because in that moment, it all made sense. The late nights. The sudden change in behavior. The hoodie. She had been doing this for months, maybe even longer, and she had the nerve to act like this was some one-time accident. When I didn't respond, she switched tactics. Suddenly, she was the victim. She blamed me. She said I had been neglecting her, that I hadn't been present in the marriage, that she felt unappreciated. Like any of that justified what she had done, that I felt my anger rising again, but I didn't want to waste another second standing there arguing with a woman who clearly had no remorse. So I walked out. That I heard her calling my name, chasing after me, but I didn't stop. I got into my car, drove off, and left her standing in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, still trying to convince me that this was somehow my fault, that I didn't know where I was going, that I just knew I couldn't be there anymore, that I don't remember much about the drive after I left the house. My hands were gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, my mind racing a mile a minute, trying to process what I had just witnessed. Jessica, my wife, in our bed, with the cleaner. It didn't seem real. That I pulled into an empty parking lot and just sat there, staring at nothing. My body felt numb, but inside, there was this rage building, a rage I had never felt before. I had given this woman everything. 6 years of my life. My trust. My loyalty. And she had thrown it all away for some guy who mopped our floors. At some point, my phone started buzzing. Jessica. I ignored the first call. And the second. By the third, I picked up, not because I wanted to talk to her, but because I wanted to hear what kind of excuse she would come up with. Her voice was frantic, shaky. She was still in damage control mode. She begged me to come home. She said we needed to talk, that we could fix this. That it was all a mistake. That I asked her how long it had been going on. She hesitated. That pause? That second of silence? It told me everything. That I pushed her for an answer, and finally, she admitted it. 3 months. 3 months of lying. 3 months of sneaking around. 3 months of making me look like a fool, and the worst part, she didn't even sound that sorry. She was crying, sure, but there was no real remorse in her voice, only panic that she had gotten caught. That I told her I wasn't coming home. Not now. Maybe not ever. I hung up before she could say anything else. For the first time since I had opened that bedroom door, I felt like I could breathe. That I wasn't going to let her twist this into something it wasn't. I wasn't going to let her make me feel guilty. She had made her choice, and now, she was going to have to live with it. That I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to my best friend Mike's place. The second he opened the door, he took one look at me and knew something was wrong. I didn't even have to say anything. I just walked inside, sat on his couch, and stared at the floor. After a few minutes, I finally muttered the words out loud. Jessica cheated on me. Saying it made it real. More real than walking in on her, more real than hearing her pathetic excuses over the phone. I was a man with a broken marriage. A man whose wife had betrayed him. Mike didn't ask questions at first. He just grabbed 2 beers, handed me one, and sat next to me in silence. And then, the anger hit me again. That I started telling him everything. The weird changes in behavior, the late nights, the hoodie, the lies. The way she tried to blame me after I caught her in the act. Mike listened, shaking his head in disbelief, and when I finally finished, he leaned forward and said exactly what I needed to hear. You know you're done, right? There's no coming back from this. And he was right. That I had no plans to work on it, or go to therapy, or do any of the things that people who are scared to walk away do. Jessica was dead to me. Still, I knew I couldn't just disappear forever. I had to face her eventually. I had to go back to the house, grab my things, and figure out the next steps. But before I could even make that decision, Jessica decided to make another brilliant move. She showed up at Mike's place at 2 a.m. I heard the banging on the door first. It was loud, frantic, like a crazy person demanding to be let inside. I knew immediately who it was. Mike groaned and got up to check. I followed him to the door, and sure enough there she was. Jessica looked a mess. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes were red from crying, and she was wearing one of my old hoodies. Like that would somehow make me feel bad for her. The moment she saw me, she rushed forward, trying to push her way inside, but Mike stepped in front of her. She started begging. Crying. Saying she couldn't sleep, that she needed to see me, that we had to talk things through. I just stood there, arms crossed, watching her crumble. she went on and on about how she didn't mean for this to happen, how she felt lost, how she still loved me. I finally cut her off. I told her we were done. There was nothing to talk about. No saving this. No fixing it. She had made her choice. Jessica's face twisted. The crocodile tears dried up instantly, and just like that, she flipped back to anger. She started yelling, calling me heartless, accusing me of giving up too easily. She even threw in the classic, "So you're really going to throw away 6 years over one mistake?" That made me laugh. One mistake, 3 months of sneaking around wasn't a mistake. Lying to my face over and over again wasn't a mistake. She had made her choices every single day. She started saying more nonsense, but at that point, I had nothing left to say. I turned to Mike, who was watching the whole thing unfold with his arms crossed, and simply said, "Get her out of here." And like the legend that he is, he stepped forward and told her she needed to leave. Now. She tried one last time, one last attempt at getting me to change my mind, but when I just stood there, staring at her, she finally realized she had lost. She turned, stormed off into the night, and I shut the door behind her. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely, utterly free. After Jessica's 2 a.m. meltdown at Mike's place, I thought she would finally get the message and leave me alone. That I was wrong. The next morning, my phone started blowing up, texts, calls, voicemails. At first, I ignored them. But when she wouldn't stop, I decided to check just one message to see if she was finally ready to accept reality. I shouldn't have bothered. Jessica wasn't apologizing. She wasn't trying to make amends. Instead, she was angry. Apparently, sometime between storming away from Mike's place and sunrise, she had gone from desperate ex-wife to furious victim. Her texts were full of accusations. I was cold, I was cruel, I had never really loved her. She even tried to twist the situation, claiming that I had abandoned our marriage and that she had turned to Daniel because she was lonely. The level of delusion was insane. She wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was only sorry that she got caught. I knew I had to face her eventually, though. I couldn't avoid the house forever. I needed to get my things, figure out the legal side of things, and start the process of getting her out of my life for good. So, that afternoon, I drove back home, and guess who was waiting for me? Jessica. She must have heard my car pull up because before I even stepped out, she was at the door, arms crossed, looking like she had rehearsed some grand speech. I didn't say a word. I just walked past her into the house. She followed me, talking a mile a minute, but I wasn't listening. I went straight to the bedroom, grabbed a suitcase, and started packing, and that's when she lost it. Jessica exploded. She screamed about how I was being immature, cruel, unforgiving. How she had made one mistake and I was throwing everything away. How she had been under stress, feeling alone, needing comfort, every single excuse in the book, and when I still didn't respond, she switched tactics. She blamed me. Said I was never home enough, that I didn't make her feel special anymore, that she had turned to Daniel because he paid attention to her. I finally snapped. I turned and told her, in the coldest voice I've ever used in my life, that she didn't get to stand there and play the victim. I reminded her that she had been lying to my face for months. That she had laughed with me at dinner while sneaking around with another man behind my back. That she had let another man into our bed, the same bed she once promised to share only with me. And then I told her the truth I hadn't said out loud yet. I didn't love her anymore. I watched her face crumble. For the first time, it seemed to actually sink in. She had ruined everything. I zipped up my suitcase and walked to the door. As I stepped outside, she whispered something so quietly I almost didn't hear it. She said she regretted everything. I didn't respond, because by that point, I didn't care anymore. Walking out of that house was like walking out of a prison I didn't even know I was trapped in. For the first time in weeks, my head felt clear. My heart wasn't racing with anxiety. There was no more confusion, no more doubt, just a cold, undeniable certainty that I was done. Jessica had made her choices. And now? She was going to face the consequences. I moved into a temporary apartment while I figured out my next steps. I met with a lawyer the very next day, and he laid everything out for me. Since the house was in my name, she had no claim to it. Our prenup meant she wasn't getting a single cent from me. The evidence of her affair, which I had gathered, put me in a strong position for a quick, uncontested divorce, legally. I was in control, emotionally. I thought I was too, until I started hearing about Jessica's downward spiral. It started with mutual friends reaching out. At first, they were hesitant, not sure how much I knew. But once I told them the truth, the floodgates opened. Apparently, Jessica wasn't just lying to me, she was lying to everyone. She had spun an entirely different version of events, one where I was the villain. According to her, I had been neglecting her for months, barely paying attention to her. She had tried to talk to me about our issues, but I had shut her out. Daniel hadn't meant anything, it was just a moment of weakness. She wasn't really at fault because I had driven her to it. Hearing this made me laugh. Actually laugh, because here's the thing, no one was buying it. Every single person I talked to saw through her lies immediately. The mutual friends who had known us for years. They knew me. They knew I was loyal to a fault. That I had done everything I could to make our marriage work. One friend straight up told me, Jessica is in full-on panic mode. She's trying to rewrite history, but nobody's falling for it. And then, the best part, even Daniel had abandoned her. I found out through a friend that Daniel had quit his cleaning job and disappeared from her life completely. Apparently, once I confronted them, he realized Jessica wasn't worth the trouble. He hadn't wanted an actual relationship, just a fling, and the moment he saw that she was becoming desperate and unhinged, he bailed. Now, Jessica was truly alone. No husband. No affair partner. No friends who actually trusted her. I should have felt bad for her, but I didn't. She had everything: a stable life, a husband who loved her, a future full of possibilities, and she threw it all away for nothing. I had won, and she was finally facing the reality she had created. Jessica had always been the type of person who believed she could talk her way out of anything. She thought she was untouchable, that no matter how badly she messed up, she could spin the story in her favor. But this time, reality hit her like a truck. After Daniel abandoned her, she tried desperately to salvage what little she had left. She reached out to mutual friends, but most of them already knew the truth and wanted nothing to do with her. One by one, people started cutting her off. I started getting updates unprompted, by the way, from people who had once been close to us. Apparently, Jessica had been crying to anyone who would listen, begging them to take her side, but the responses were brutal. Some people ignored her completely, others flat out told her that she got what she deserved. A few even called her out for trying to play the victim when she was the one who had destroyed the marriage. But the biggest blow? Her own family turned against her. Jessica had always been close to her parents, but when they found out what happened, they were furious. Her mom, who had always been polite to me but never overly warm, actually reached out to apologize. I'll never forget her words: "I raised my daughter better than this. I don't know what got into her, but I won't defend it." That was the moment I realized just how far Jessica had fallen. She had no support system left. No husband. No affair partner. No friends. No family backing her up. And then, she lost her job. Apparently, her performance at work had taken a massive dive. She had been showing up late, missing deadlines, and when people started avoiding her socially, she completely lost it. She had a meltdown at work, something about how nobody respected her anymore. A few days later, she was let go. I should have felt bad for her, but I didn't, because every single thing happening to her, she brought it on herself. I had moved on. I had filed for divorce. I was focused on my future, and Jessica, she was left standing in the wreckage of her own choices. Jessica had lost everything: her marriage gone, her affair partner vanished, her friends cut her off, her job fired, even her own family had turned their backs on her. She had officially hit rock bottom. Or at least, that's what I thought, but somehow, she found a way to sink even lower. I had barely heard from her in weeks. After I filed for divorce, I made it clear I had nothing left to say to her. She still sent the occasional text, things like, "I miss you," or, "I wish we could talk," but I ignored them. Then, one night, she called me. I was about to send it to voicemail when something in my gut told me to pick up. Big mistake. Jessica was hysterical. She was crying, gasping for air, talking in a frantic, panicked voice. She said she had nowhere to go, that she was completely alone, that she had made a terrible mistake, and then, she dropped the bombshell. She claimed she was pregnant. I swear, for a full 10 seconds, I didn't even react. My brain just froze, then, reality snapped back, pregnant, not possible that I hadn't touched her in months. I knew, without a doubt, that this wasn't my child. That I asked her how far along she was, and of course, she hesitated before mumbling something about not being sure yet. That was all I needed to hear. This was a Hail Mary attempt at a last-ditch effort to keep me in her life. That I didn't even argue. I just told her, flat out, that if she was pregnant, it wasn't mine. And if she really wanted to prove otherwise, she could take a paternity test. Silence. Then, she completely lost it. She screamed that I was cruel for doubting her, that I was abandoning my responsibility, that I was just as bad as Daniel. And that last part, that made me laugh, because Daniel? He hadn't wanted her either. I told her to get a test and send me the results. Otherwise, I didn't want to hear from her again, and you know what happened next. She never mentioned the pregnancy again, because, just like everything else, it was a lie. Jessica was running out of ways to manipulate people, and soon, she was going to run out completely. After the fake pregnancy stunt failed, I thought that was it. I thought Jessica had finally accepted her fate and would disappear from my life for good. I was wrong, because karma wasn't done with her yet. A few weeks after that chaotic phone call, I was out grabbing coffee when my phone started buzzing. Multiple texts, all at once. It was from mutual friends. Every message had the same tone. Dude, check Facebook now. Oh my God, this is gold. Jessica is having a full-blown meltdown online. I opened the app and instantly saw what they were talking about. Jessica had completely lost it. She had posted a massive rant on her page, public for everyone to see. A long, emotional, rage-fueled post about how she had been betrayed and abandoned. But the best part, she actually tried to blame me. According to her, I was a cold, heartless husband who never paid attention to her. She had made a mistake but deserved a second chance. I had ruined her life by refusing to fight for our marriage. I had spread lies about her to turn people against her, and, my personal favorite, she had been manipulated by Daniel. She claimed Daniel had pursued her aggressively, that he had taken advantage of her vulnerability, and made her think she had feelings for him when she really didn't. The same guy she threw away her marriage for. The guy she cheated on me with for months. Now she was blaming him. I nearly spit out my coffee. Jessica was in full-on victim mode. And the most hilarious part, nobody was buying it. The comment section was a battlefield. People tore her apart. So let me get this straight. You cheated, lied, and got caught, and now you want to play the victim? LOL. You were manipulated? Funny, I remember you laughing at your husband while sneaking around behind his back. This might be the worst attempt at damage control I've ever seen. You lost a good man and now you're mad that he won't let you weasel your way back in. Get help. Even her own family wasn't siding with her. Her mom, who had already expressed her disappointment, left a single comment: Jessica, take this down. You need to take responsibility for your actions. Ouch. That I didn't comment. I didn't need to. The internet was handling it for me, and Jessica, she ended up deleting the entire post, but the damage was already done. She had publicly humiliated herself in front of everyone. And now, she had no one left to blame. After Jessica's public meltdown on Facebook, it was like watching a slow-motion car crash. Horrifying, but impossible to look away from. Her desperate attempt to rewrite history had backfired spectacularly. She wasn't just humiliated, she was a joke. The backlash was relentless. Friends who had once stood by her were now openly mocking her. People she had considered loyal were dropping her left and right. Even her own family had lost patience. Jessica had burned every bridge she had left, and now, she had nowhere to go. A few days after her Facebook disaster, I got a call from a mutual friend, Sarah. I debated ignoring it. I was done dealing with Jessica's drama, but curiosity got the best of me. Sarah didn't waste time with pleasantries. She told me that Jessica had officially hit rock bottom. She had tried getting her job back only to be told that her position had already been filled. She had reached out to old friends for help, but no one wanted to be involved in her mess. She had even tried calling Daniel, the guy she had thrown our marriage away for, and his response: he blocked her. Jessica had gambled everything: her husband, her reputation, her career on a guy who never even cared about her. And when she needed him the most, he vanished. Now, she was broke, jobless, and alone. Sarah, who still had a tiny shred of sympathy left, said Jessica had been begging people to let her crash on their couches. Nobody was taking her in. Even her own mother told her she needed to figure things out on her own. For the first time in her life, Jessica had to face the consequences of her actions without anyone there to clean up her mess. That I should have felt bad for her, but I didn't, because this was all her doing. That I thought that was the end of it. That I was wrong. Late one night, Jessica called me. That I stared at my phone for a long moment, debating whether to answer. Eventually, curiosity won out. That I picked up, and immediately, I could hear it. She was crying. Her voice was small, shaky. She told me she was sorry, that she missed me, that she had messed up so badly, and didn't know how to fix it. She said she didn't want anything from me, just to talk. That I let her talk for a while, not saying much, and then, when she was done, I simply asked, "Are you sorry because you regret what you did? Or are you sorry because of what happened after?" Silence, then, a quiet sniffle. That I had my answer. Jessica wasn't sorry for betraying me. She was sorry because she had lost everything. That I told her that was her problem, and then, I hung up. No second chances. No long-winded arguments. Nothing. That was the last time I ever spoke to her. I finalized the divorce. It was quick, clean, and completely in my favor. I kept the house, my savings, and everything I had built. Jessica walked away with nothing. My life? It moved forward. I surrounded myself with real friends, focused on work, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. And Jessica, she left town. Nobody really knows where she went. Nobody really cares, because in the end, she had played herself, and I won. After I hung up on Jessica that night, something strange happened. I sat there, staring at my phone, waiting to feel something: anger, sadness, regret, anything. But all I felt was relief. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't tangled up in Jessica's lies, manipulation, or constant need for attention. The weight of everything she had done, the betrayal, the gaslighting, the emotional roller coaster, was finally off my shoulders. Jessica was gone, and I had my life back. The weeks after the divorce were strangely peaceful. I had spent so much time dealing with Jessica's nonsense that I had forgotten what it was like to just be me. I started going to the gym again. I picked up old hobbies that I had abandoned during my marriage. I spent more time with friends, real friends, the ones who had stood by me throughout everything. It was like I had been sleepwalking through life for years, and suddenly, I was wide awake. And the more time passed, the more I realized something: Jessica had never been good for me. Sure, in the beginning, things had been great. She had been fun, exciting, confident. But underneath all of that, she had always been selfish. Everything in our marriage had revolved around her needs, her desires, her emotions. If I ever needed support, it was an inconvenience. If I ever expressed concerns, I was being too sensitive. And when she got bored, she didn't try to fix things. She didn't communicate. She cheated, because in her mind, I was replaceable. And yet, when everything fell apart, when I was finally gone, she realized too late that I had been the only thing holding her life together. One thing this experience showed me was who my real friends were: the people who immediately took my side, who didn't hesitate to cut Jessica off. Those are the people who mattered, the ones who stayed neutral, who told me things like, "Well, it's complicated," or, "You should at least hear her out." Yeah. I cut those people out of my life too, because at the end of the day, cheating is not complicated. You make a commitment to someone, and when things get tough, you either work on it or walk away. You don't betray the person who trusted you the most. Jessica had made her choice, and now, she was living with it. Months later, I heard through the grapevine that Jessica had moved out of state. Nobody really knew what she was doing, but from what little I heard, it wasn't anything good. She had burned too many bridges, lost too many people, and the reality of her own choices had finally hit her. She thought she could throw everything away and walk off without consequences. She was wrong. Looking back, if I could give anyone advice from this experience, it would be this: trust your gut. If something feels off in your relationship, don't ignore it. The little things, the sudden secrecy, the mood changes, the weird work schedules, they mean something. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for walking away. Jessica tried to guilt-trip me into staying, even after I caught her in the act. Cheaters will twist reality to make themselves the victim. Don't fall for it. Real friends will show themselves when things fall apart. If people defend a cheater, cut them off too. They're not worth keeping in your life. Never ignore red flags. Jessica had always been manipulative, but I brushed it off because I thought she loved me. Love without respect is worthless, and most importantly, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Jessica showed me exactly who she was, and now, she was just a bad chapter in my life that I had finally closed. T's been a year since I walked out of that house, since I packed my bags, cut Jessica out of my life, and chose myself over the mess she created. A full year of freedom. A year of peace, and looking back, I can confidently say, Jessica's betrayal was the best thing that ever happened to me. I rebuilt my life from the ground up. First, it was hard. Even though I knew I had done the right thing, there were moments where the weight of everything hit me late at night, when the silence felt louder than usual, but those moments didn't last. Because every day, I felt stronger. I focused on myself for the first time in years. I started hitting the gym regularly, not out of anger or revenge, but because it made me feel good. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who had stuck by me, who reminded me who I was before my marriage had drained the life out of me. I took up new hobbies, learned new skills, traveled to places I had always wanted to visit. And most importantly, I learned to be happy alone. I had spent so much time in that marriage, feeling like I had to fix things, make it work, be the bigger person. But once I was free, I realized something huge: I was never the problem. Jessica was always selfish. Always manipulative. She wanted a relationship where she got to be worshipped, where she could do whatever she wanted without consequences, and when things didn't go her way, she found someone else to feed her ego. She threw away a good, stable life for a fling with a guy who couldn't even be bothered to stick around, and now, she was the one who had to live with her choices. After she moved out of state, I didn't hear much about her, but a few months ago, I ran into an old mutual friend who had some interesting updates. Apparently, Jessica had tried to reinvent herself in a new city. She tried to land another high-level job, but her reputation followed her. News of her workplace meltdown and professional downfall had spread, and nobody wanted to hire someone with that kind of baggage. She ended up taking a low-paying admin job. Nothing wrong with that, except for the fact that Jessica had always acted like she was too good for that kind of work. She had lost her status, her money, her social circle, and from what I heard, she was still alone. I don't know if she's dating anyone, but it doesn't really matter. Because even if she is, I know one thing for certain: she will never be happy, not truly, because someone like Jessica, someone who lies, manipulates, and treats people like disposable objects, never finds real happiness. They spend their lives chasing validation, but deep down, they know exactly who they are, and no amount of new relationships, new jobs, or new beginnings will erase that. If you've made it this far, if you've followed my story from the beginning, here's what I want to leave you with. If you ever find yourself in a situation like mine, don't waste your time trying to fix what's already broken. When someone cheats on you, betrays you, disrespects you, they are telling you exactly who they are. Believe them. Don't let them guilt you into staying. Don't let them rewrite history. Don't let them manipulate you into thinking it's your fault. Walk away, and once you do, I promise you your life will get better. Mine did, and looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. The best revenge isn't getting even. It isn't exposing them. It isn't making them suffer. The best revenge is moving on and becoming happier than they ever will be, and that's exactly what I did.